She wasn't just a model, she became the very face of France. But behind that national symbol was a story the world never saw. Laetitia Casta's life was, in many ways, a clash between two worlds, the glittering illusion of the runway and the heavy burden carried by a woman behind closed doors. When she was chosen to embody Marianne, the ultimate national icon of France, people only saw beauty. What they didn't see was a young woman trying to breathe under the invisible chains of expectation. How did a shy girl from the quiet coast of Normandy transform into both a supermodel and the face of an entire nation? The answer is far more complex than it seems. Laetitia Casta was born on May 11, 1978, in the small French town of Pont-Audemer. She grew up by the Normandy coast, in a household that reflected two different worlds. Her father was Corsican, her mother Normand, and that dual heritage gave her both a strong sense of belonging and an inner tension. Normandy's quiet landscapes shaped her early personality. As a child, she would often walk along the shore, watching the sea and drifting into silent dreams. Her classmates found her too quiet, even shy. But her silence was nothing more than a reflection of her deep imagination. Though her beauty was noticed from an early age, no one could have predicted that she would become one of the most recognized faces in the world. Teachers expected her to live a modest and ordinary life. Yet destiny had written a different script for Laetitia at just 15. Her life was dramatically altered by a chance discovery. While on holiday in Corsica, a talent scout spotted her. Her hazel hair, striking eyes, and distinctly French aura made her stand out. At first, she thought it was a joke. She had no connection to the fashion world and was so shy that she didn't even enjoy being photographed. But fate had other plans. Soon, she was invited to Paris. For Laetitia, Paris was both enchanting and intimidating. The tall walls of fashion houses, the dazzling runway shows, and the overwhelming city lights, all of it felt foreign. During her first shoots, she felt awkward, not knowing how to pose. But she possessed something unique: authenticity. Her timid glances, her genuine smile, and her natural grace quickly set her apart by the mid-1990s. Laetitia had become one of the most talked-about models in France. She graced the covers of Elle and Vogue. Prestigious houses like Dior, Chanel, and Yves Saint Laurent lined up to work with her. But what truly set her apart wasn't just her beauty. She was seen as the embodiment of French identity itself. In a modeling world filled with faces from every corner of the globe, Laetitia was viewed as the authentic French muse. Her rise quickly extended to the international stage with Victoria's Secret. By the late 1990s, she was one of the brand's brightest angels. With her long blonde hair, captivating gaze, and distinct walk, she became a star of the runway. Yet that fame came at a price. The press constantly highlighted her perfect body, dissecting her measurements, magnifying even the slightest change. The weight of such scrutiny was exhausting. Even for someone used to the spotlight then, in 1999, came one of the most defining moments of her career. She was chosen as Marianne, the symbol of the French Republic. Marianne represents liberty, equality, and fraternity, core values of France. In the past, icons like Brigitte Bardot and Catherine Deneuve had carried the title. But Laetitia's selection sparked a storm. While some praised her as the face of modern France, others criticized her, calling her too sexy and too frivolous. For Laetitia, the experience was transformative. On one hand, she was proud to be chosen as the embodiment of her nation. On the other, she suddenly realized that she could no longer exist simply as herself. Every move, every word, every image of her became a matter of public debate. At just 21 years old, Laetitia was carrying the weight of a nation's identity on her shoulders. Being chosen as Marianne wasn't just a career milestone for Laetitia Casta, it was a burden she hadn't asked for. Marianne wasn't merely a symbol. She was France itself, a figure of liberty, equality, and fraternity. To carry that image meant stepping into history. At only 21 years old, Laetitia was suddenly forced into a role that no ordinary young woman could easily endure. The French press dissected the decision for weeks. Some journalists praised her, calling her the new face of modern France. Others, however, launched scathing critiques. Conservative voices labeled her too erotic, too lighthearted, and unfit to represent the Republic. Old photos of her bold magazine shoots were resurfaced as evidence that she was unworthy. Overnight, she was no longer just a model. She was a battleground for France's cultural identity. Politicians even entered the debate. Right-wing figures argued she embodied decadence, while progressives defended her as a symbol of evolving femininity. Laetitia, caught in the middle, felt both honored and crushed. She later said, "I am an artist, a model." Refusing Marianne would have been an insult to the women of France. Her words resonated, showing a quiet defiance. Yet behind that public courage lay a fragile heart struggling to reconcile with the immense weight of expectation. Friends revealed that during this period, Laetitia often broke down in private. In interviews, she smiled, projecting calm and elegance. But behind closed doors, she confessed that being turned into a national symbol felt suffocating. The same people who once praised her beauty now dissected her every move, holding her to impossible standards. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, she was thriving in an entirely different way. At Victoria's Secret, she emerged as one of the brand's most dazzling angels. In 1998, when she first donned angel wings on the runway, the fashion world erupted in applause. She quickly became known as the French Angel. In America, she was celebrated for her sensuality. Yet back home in France, those same qualities fueled criticism. It was as if she was being pulled in two directions. Embraced abroad, judged at home. The paradox deepened her sense of isolation. She once described her life as feeling like being a suitcase, moved from one place to another, with no control over where I land. The whirlwind of photo shoots, fashion weeks, and endless flights left her drained. Fame was intoxicating, but it also left her feeling like a commodity rather than a person. Despite the exhaustion, her natural authenticity endeared her to the public. For young French girls, she became more than just a model. They saw in her an image of independence and strength. Posters of Laetitia as Marianne adorned bedrooms across the country. Even those who criticized her couldn't deny the influence she wielded. By the late 1990s, she was everywhere: Vogue covers, Dior campaigns, Victoria's Secret runways. Her name was synonymous with supermodel, yet deep down she knew the glitter wouldn't last forever. Fashion was fickle, and faces changed with every season. That realization pushed her to explore beyond the catwalk. Acting, art, and social causes began to call her name. Laetitia Casta's story was no longer just about runways or magazine covers. It was about transformation. She wasn't simply a French girl who became a model. She was a national icon, a cultural symbol, and most importantly, a woman learning to navigate the weight of her own identity under the relentless gaze of the world. By 1998, Laetitia Casta had already gone far beyond France. Vogue covers, Dior and Chanel campaigns had made her a familiar name in the world of high fashion. But the true turning point came when she stepped onto the Victoria's Secret runway. Until then, she had been known as the embodiment of French elegance. In America, however, she became something entirely different. The French Angel. The Victoria's Secret fashion show wasn't just a runway, it was a global television event. Millions of viewers tuned in each year to watch models don angel wings and strut under the glittering lights. When Laetitia first walked with wings in 1998, audiences were mesmerized. With her long blonde hair, powerful stride, and radiant energy, she instantly became one of the most talked about models in the world. The press labeled her the perfect body. Not only in France but also in America, this title followed her everywhere. After every show, newspapers printed her measurements. Commentators dissected her physique, and even the smallest change in her appearance became headline news. Some articles called her a goddess. Others said she was too perfect to be real. But behind that image, Laetitia struggled. In interviews, she often tried to soften the obsession by saying, "For me, beauty isn't only physical, it's something spiritual." Around this time, her contract with Maybelline became another defining moment. Her face was suddenly everywhere, on billboards, in glossy magazines, in TV commercials. Laetitia was no longer just a model. She had become a global brand. One week she was walking for Dior in Paris, the next she was on the Victoria's Secret stage in New York, and then off to London for a Vogue cover shoot. The pace was relentless. elevating her career but draining her energy. The media obsession extended into her personal life. In France, she was still endlessly debated as Marianne. In America, headlines declared her the sexiest woman alive. The contrast left her in a constant identity struggle. She once said in an interview, "I am just a woman doing her job." But people decide for themselves who I am supposed to be on the Victoria's Secret stage. Her walk, her soft smile, and her graceful movements made her stand out. The New York Times even described her presence as poetry in motion. Fashion critics praised her for being sexy yet approachable, saying she carried both the aura of a femme fatale and the warmth of the girl next door. But behind the scenes, the glitter cast heavy shadows. Endless travel, exhausting shoots, and the suffocating demand for perfection began to take a toll on her mental health. She smiled for the cameras, but privately, she carried a deep fatigue. In one candid interview, she confessed, "Sometimes I feel like a mannequin in a store window. Everyone looks, but no one really sees who I am." This first half of Chapter 2 captures Laetitia's rise to international fame with Victoria's Secret and the major fashion houses, while also revealing the psychological toll of living under constant pressure to embody perfection. Laetitia Casta's impact on the Victoria's Secret runway was so powerful that she quickly became one of the most talked about models in the world. In the 1999 and 2000 shows, her appearances practically stopped time. Millions tuned in to watch her stride with wings, radiating a uniquely French elegance. These shows weren't just about fashion. They were cultural events, and Laetitia stood at the very center, but behind the glamour, reality was grueling. Laetitia often spoke about how exhausting the backstage preparations were. People see us as perfect on stage, but they don't realize the weight of those wings. Hours of makeup rehearsals, and the pressure to look flawless, it takes a toll, she once admitted in France. Her participation in Victoria's Secret stirred controversy. Critics argued that Marianne parading in lingerie with angel wings diminishes a national symbol. Laetitia, however, responded with calm grace, "I am an artist, a model. On stage, my role is to sell dreams." Being Marianne was one responsibility. Being on the Victoria's Secret stage was another at the same time. She maintained her strong ties with Dior, Chanel, and Yves Saint Laurent. Her face represented both the refinement of haute couture and the allure of American pop culture. This dual identity made her career one of a kind. Still, the success carried heavy costs. She often confessed, "I feel split in two. On one side, she was Marianne, the face of France. On the other, she was Victoria's Secret's French angel." The clash of these identities sometimes left her in deep solitude. By 2000, Time magazine named her the new face of the 21st century. Yet that same period saw growing scrutiny of her body. Some columnists speculated she had gained weight, while others insisted she still embodied the perfect proportions. The constant commentary began to affect her own perception of herself, and yet, on stage, she remained unstoppable. Her walk, her confident gaze, and her radiant energy set her apart. Perhaps that was her secret. No matter the pressure, no matter the criticism, she always knew how to shine like a star under the lights. By the early 2000s, Laetitia Casta was no longer just the star of the runway. She was emerging as a rising star in cinema. Many models had tried acting before, but very few managed to leave a lasting impression. Laetitia became one of the exceptions. For her, film was more than a glittering extension of fashion. It was a more intimate way of expressing herself. One of her first major breakthroughs came in 1999 with Asterix and Obelix's take on Caesar, where she played the character Fabala. Bringing one of France's most beloved comic book heroines to life was a huge responsibility. At the time, she was still walking for Victoria's Secret and Dior, yet on screen she radiated a different kind of energy. Audiences adored her natural charm, and critics called her performance surprisingly convincing. After that, Laetitia found more space in French cinema. In 2001, she appeared in Les Ames Fortes, taking on a more dramatic role. This proves she wasn't just a beautiful face, but also an actress capable of emotional depth. She often remarked in interviews, "In cinema, the camera captures the soul behind your face." On the runway, you never feel that vulnerable still. She didn't sever ties with fashion. In the early 2000s, she continued to work with Chanel, Givenchy, and Yves Saint Laurent, while gracing countless Vogue covers. Balancing this dual career came with its own challenges. Fashion demanded her to remain an icon, while cinema required her to strip down her glamour and reveal vulnerability. For Laetitia, navigating both worlds wasn't easy. The media frequently amplified this conflict. French newspapers ran headlines like, "Casta, Marianne or actress?" Some argued she should abandon fashion for film. Others doubted she would ever succeed as an actress. But despite the criticism, she pressed on. Around this time, the French press began hailing her as the heir to Brigitte Bardot. With her looks and cultural presence, comparisons were inevitable. Yet Laetitia kept her distance from the label. "Bardot was an icon. I'm just trying to carve my own path," she insisted. Determined to establish her own identity, Hollywood also began showing interest. But Laetitia largely chose to keep her career rooted in France. Part of the reason was that in the American film industry, models turned actresses were often relegated to decorative roles. She wanted more than that: powerful stories, dramatic roles, a genuine cinematic career. By the early 2000s, Laetitia Casta had established herself firmly in both fashion and cinema. On the runway, she embodied perfect beauty on screen. She fought to prove she was a real actress. This dual identity shaped her into one of the most complex and compelling figures of her generation. Laetitia Casta's cinematic journey was never just about appearing in big productions. What set her apart was the quality of the projects she chose and the depth she brought to her characters. In 2002, she starred in Gitano alongside Antonio Flores. Here, she played a darker, more conflicted character full of passion and contradictions. This role proved she wasn't limited to romantic or aesthetic portrayals. French critics followed her career closely. Some wrote, "Casta is surprisingly natural on camera, but she must continue to make bold choices." During this period, Laetitia herself declared, "If I don't constantly reinvent myself, acting loses its meaning for me," showing she was ready to push her own boundaries. In 2004, she took on a more dramatic role in Errance. The film tackled heavy themes, and Laetitia's performance was praised especially for its emotional intensity. Audiences connected easily with her vulnerability, often reflected in her expressive eyes. Around the same time, Casta also ventured into theater. She appeared in classic plays on Parisian stages, and she admitted that theater challenged her even more than cinema. "Theater gave me courage. Because even on the runway, I never felt this exposed," she said. Through it all, she never completely abandoned fashion. Campaigns with Chanel and Givenchy ensured she remained one of the rare figures straddling both cinema and fashion. Vogue continued to feature her on its covers, further cementing her dual identity. By the mid-2000s, Laetitia was no longer simply a model or an actress. She had become a multifaceted cultural icon in France. In interviews, she often said, "I don't want to live with just one identity. For me, art is a journey, sometimes on the runway, sometimes on the screen, sometimes on stage." This versatility only enhanced her international fame. When she walked the red carpet at Cannes, newspapers ran headlines like, "Marianne at Cannes." Yet Laetitia carried that fame without arrogance. She always remained simple, genuine, and natural. By the late 2000s, Laetitia Casta was no longer just the star of runways and films. She was also a mother. When she held her first child in her arms, it marked a major turning point in her career. Until then, her schedule had been filled with fashion shows, campaigns, and film shoots. But motherhood gave her a new sense of priority. In interviews, she often repeated, "The greatest role of my life is motherhood." The fashion industry had a history of pushing women to the sidelines after becoming mothers, quickly replacing them with younger faces. But Laetitia defied that narrative. She managed to raise her children while still remaining relevant in the projects she chose. When paparazzi captured her walking through the streets of Paris with her children, the press ran headlines like, "From supermodel to supermom." In 2007, she decided to slow down her hectic runway schedule. She no longer chased every offer, accepting only projects that resonated with her. This marked a new phase in her career, one focused on quality over quantity. She still appeared in exclusive campaigns for major brands like Dior and Chanel. But she stepped away from the relentless rhythm of runway marathons during this period. Cinema provided her with a more balanced path. In 2008, she starred in Born in '68, portraying a woman whose story stretched across decades. Her real-life experience as a mother gave her performances new depth. Audiences noticed the shift. Her energy was more grounded. More mature French media began writing, "Casta is no longer just an icon. She is also a storyteller." Around the same time, her image was officially used as Marianne, the national symbol of the French Republic, reinforcing her status as the face of French womanhood. Yet Laetitia never let herself be reduced to a mere symbol. In interviews, she said, "The most important scenes of my life are the ones I live at home with my children." Even though she had slowed her career, the fashion and film industries never let her go. She occasionally made surprise appearances on the runway at Paris Fashion Week, moments that quickly went viral on social media. Fans excitedly declared, "Casta is back." But for her, these comebacks weren't about spectacle anymore, they were about sharing a moment. When Laetitia Casta chose motherhood, she also opened a new chapter in her career. In 2009, she played Brigitte Bardot in Gainsbourg, Vie Heroique. This was significant not only in cinematic terms but also symbolically. Bardot had been an icon of her era, and Laetitia was the symbol of a new age. The icon legacy seemed to pass from one generation to the next. The film received widespread critical acclaim, and Laetitia's acting skills were no longer questioned. She masterfully captured Bardot's allure, defiance, and underlying fragility. This performance proves she wasn't just someone from the fashion scene, she was truly an artist at the same time. Curiosity about her private life grew. The press constantly asked how she balanced motherhood with her career. She would always reply calmly, "I have chosen my life. My children are my priority, but art is my breath." By the 2010s, motherhood had reshaped Laetitia's values. Rather than chasing the glitter of endless runways, she preferred projects with deeper meaning. Her work with UNICEF and her outspoken advocacy for women's rights solidified her reputation, not just as an artist but also as an activist in France. She continued to be remembered as the face of Marianne, but for Laetitia, this symbol was not a burden, it was a responsibility. In interviews, she often said, "Marianne is not only about beauty, it's about liberty and equality." That is far more valuable to me. When she appeared at the Cannes Film Festival during these years, she walked the red carpet not only as a star but also as a mother. Her dual identity inspired audiences everywhere. Pursue your dreams, but also cherish your family. By 2015, Laetitia Casta had entered a completely new phase of her career. For her, being constantly visible on the runway or in front of the camera was no longer a necessity. She chose projects selectively, leaving behind the pressure of always being famous. In an interview, she once said, "When you're young, you think you need to be seen all the time. But real strength lies in knowing when to step back." During these years, she focused more on film projects. In 2016, her role in The Crusade, screened at the Cannes Film Festival, showcased her matured acting abilities. Critics praised her natural style of acting. She was no longer a model trying to act, she was a fully fledged, versatile artist at the same time. Laetitia became deeply involved in campaigns with UNICEF. She became one of France's strongest voices for children's rights, education, and healthcare. At events, she often chose to wear simple, natural outfits, saying, "My message is not about fashion, it's about children." This attitude only increased the respect she commanded. She also stood firmly for women's rights. Laetitia openly criticized the oppressive beauty standards of the fashion industry. Her statement, "Women are beautiful with their flaws. What makes us strong are our differences," resonated deeply with wide audiences as social media rose. Laetitia reached a new generation of followers. But unlike many celebrities, her Instagram feed wasn't filled with glamorous excess. Instead, she mostly shared old photos and candid moments. This authentic approach made her an inspiring figure for younger fans. In 2017, she married French actor Louis Garrel. Their union brought a new balance to her life. While the marriage was widely covered by the media, Laetitia continued to guard her private life carefully. In France, she was still remembered as the face of Marianne. But now, what she represented wasn't just beauty, it was also awareness, courage, and freedom. In a 2018 speech, she said, "Being a French woman is not about aesthetics. It is about raising your voice for equality and liberty." By the 2020s, Laetitia Casta had become more than a model or an actress. She had become a living symbol within France's cultural memory. Her story didn't just exist on runways or cinema screens. It lived in the minds and hearts of people during this period. Laetitia continued her acting career with careful selection. She chose independent films that reflected her devotion to art. When she appeared at Cannes in 2021, audiences gave her standing ovations. Her presence was no longer just about physical beauty. She had become an embodiment of French identity, a fusion of grace and courage. Her voice grew even stronger on social issues. From women's rights to environmental awareness to the struggles of migrants, her speeches positioned her not just as a star but as a figure of conscience. One of her quotes summed up her vision perfectly. "As a model, you can decorate the world, but as a human being, you must change." She also began mentoring younger models, sharing wisdom from her own journey. Don't try to fit into other people's molds. Be present with your body, your mind, and your soul, she told them. This perspective directly challenged the pressures that still dominate the fashion industry today. Laetitia Casta is considered one of France's living legends. Her face may still be remembered as the symbol of Marianne, but the legacy she leaves behind is much greater: a bold artist, a loving mother, and a powerful activist. In short, Laetitia's story is not only the journey of a career but also the story of a society's transformation. She is no longer the perfect face of France. She has become its living spirit.